Today we are going to show you how to tighten your ASR mount. So your ASR mount, if you haven't seen it, watch our ASR mount video, it talks all about it. But essentially, it's a thread over muzzle device mount that seats on a taper, and then you have a secondary method of retention to keep it from vibrating loose. So normally, if we put this on a firearm, the thread's on until it stops, and then you turn your collar. If you mount it gently and turn your collar, and you can still back it off with a couple of fingers with very gentle force, your ASR spring has likely been worn out. This doesn't happen very often. This can happen if you're one of those guys that actually does shoot a lot, and you have a lot of extreme heat cycling. That spring can eventually it just kind of starts to weaken and lose its pressure over a long period of time. So most people never have to worry about this. But if you do find yourself in a situation where you have worn out an ASR mount and you can move it over the teeth that easily, that's not right. You can always crank it off if you mean to. It's not meant to keep you from doing that. It's meant to keep it shouldered if there's vibrations and shock from firing. But if it's that easy, and that is almost nothing, you may have worn it out. So we're going to show you how to fix that. And we'll throw that in a vise. Got some soft jaws in here. I don't need to tighten this down. This is just to hold it for convenience. You may have seen in our other video talking about the ASR mount, or if you're just mechanically inclined and you've looked, you know when you turn your collar, you have these thicker portions of the collar that actually go over the lobes of those springs and compress it, pushing it into the teeth of the muzzle device. If you've used it enough and it's heat cycled enough that your pressure is weak, we really just want to get more pressure on those lobes. So we've got our stop screw on here. We're going to take that out with a hex key. And then that will actually allow us to turn the collar past its normal stopping point and just thread this down out of the way of the spring completely. And we're essentially just going to bend out these lobes back to where they were when it was new. You can do that with a pick or a flathead screwdriver that fits in there. So I'm just going to stick it in there. And it really doesn't take much. You don't want to go crazy. You can kind of see where it starts with the gap right there at the back of it. And you just want to give it a little twist. Just slightly bend those out. And don't do this unless you actually need to. There's no reason to put more wear and tear on your mount than necessary. So once we've bent those out just a little bit, I'm going to bring my collar back, unthread it to where it ought to be, and I'll have to guide those tabs in as I thread it back to help it get underneath the edge there. And then I'm going to get it to where I can put my stop screw back in. I'm going to tighten it nice and snug. You can use a little dab of Rockset or Red Loctite to keep it in place for the long term if you like. And there we go. So let's test it out and see how it does. All right, so let's test out our newly adjusted spring. We're gonna thread it onto our muzzle. And I don't want it on the taper because I kind of just want to test the tooth engagement. So I'm gonna back it off the taper just a little bit and lock it. And yeah, with a couple fingers, I can't, with a reasonable amount of force, I can't get it to strip or skip over the teeth. So we're about where we want it. The ASR system with the collar, with the teeth and the spring biting into the muzzle device, those aren't meant to keep you from intentionally torquing it off. You can. They're meant to give you a secondary amount of security versus just threading it over a muzzle and sitting on a taper. It gives you that additional security to keep it from backing off. And that's exactly what it's meant to do. Shock and vibration from firing, transport, etc. So that's it. That's how you tighten up your ASR mount if you're one of the few that's actually put enough time and rounds through it to wear that spring down. You can refresh it and give it a new life.